Welcome back to the Postulates of Quantum Mechanics playlist on Catalyst University. My name is Kevin Tokoph. Make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. In this video, we're going to talk about one more quantum mechanical postulate, and that is the act of measurement, which has to do with the collapse of the wave function. Now, the act of measurement is closely tied with Schrodinger's paradox, and you might have heard of the concept of Schrodinger's cat. I really don't like that analogy because I actually really like cats. In fact, I have 7 of them. So I'm actually going to use an actual physical scientific example, and I understand this example I'm using is not rigorously correct, and there's bound to be people that point out errors in it. I'm simply using it as an example to illustrate the point, because at this point, most likely in quantum, you have not encountered the quantum mechanical models, like particle in a box and so forth, so it's a little bit more difficult to understand. So I'm using this only as a conceptual framework. It is not necessarily rigorously correct. But I did use this example of a molecule that is a resonance hybrid with different resonance contributors. I used this in the previous video when we talked about basis sets. Okay? And remember that in resonance, back to organic chemistry, that a molecule can have multiple resonance structures, and these each are resonance contributors, but they do not contribute equally to the overall structure of the molecule. For example, in this example, Xi2 and Xi3 contribute the most. These are physical states of the molecule. These contribute the most, and 1 and 4 are the least. Now, what I actually did, based on the calculation in the previous video, I actually made a table right here that shows the percent contribution of each of those physical states, Xi 1 through 4, which is 6.9, 43.1, 43.1, 6.9%, yielding a total of 100%, obviously, because they have to all add up to 100, basically. Okay? And again, this was our general expression for a linear combination of eigenfunctions making a basis set. So E1 Xi1 plus E2 Xi2, so on and so forth, to En Xi n yield the total wave function. Okay? And in this example, if I use the numbers I used in the previous video, we have 10 times Xi1 plus 25 times Xi2 plus 25 times Xi3 plus 10 times Xi4 is our total resonance hybrid. And then I did this and calculated the probabilities. Now, remember that the molecule, if you actually had this molecule, it does not exist as one of these and it bounces between all of them. All of these resonance contributors, they contribute to different extents, but they all exist simultaneously. Okay, you can see, like we said, Xi1 and Xi4 contribute the least, but they still exist at any given time. Now, I understand that resonance is not like it's bouncing between each of these, and you couldn't really catch one of these states. You couldn't just catch one of these. But it turns out that with electrons, when we start doing models, you can catch something in a particular location or a state. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as an example to illustrate that, and that's why I'm saying it's not rigorously correct. So the question is, if we theoretically froze the molecule in one of these states, and I'm just going to pick Xi2 because I talked about that briefly in the previous video. Let's say I were somehow able to freeze this molecule. Like, let's just say it was bouncing between each of the states, and let's say I caught it right at state 2. I froze the molecule, and I went to some kind of spectroscopy apparatus, and I measured it, and it was state 2. I was able to deduce the structure, and I have state 2. If you catch a molecule in a particular state, so that's represented by this Xi right here, this Xi2 in the total resonance hybrid, or the total wave function. If I catch it in Xi2, and I actually am able to measure it and say, that is that molecule, I froze it, what happens to the rest of these eigenfunctions, Xi1, Xi3, and Xi4? And if there's any more, what happens to those? They no longer exist. You caught the molecule. Now, in quantum mechanics, nothing really is in one place. Things are not in fixed places as they are in classical mechanics. For example, I have a thing of Diet Mountain Dew sitting right here on the counter, and for all intents and purposes, the way I'm looking at it, it's just sitting there. It's going to stay there until a force acts on it, right? I pick it up and drink it. But in quantum, things don't happen like that. There's probabilities that these particles, electrons, say, exist in certain spots. And there's maybe higher probabilities it's in some spots and lower probabilities that it's in other spots. But if you actually measure it and you catch an electron right in a given spot, you collapse the wave function because there's zero probability that you'll find it anywhere else because you actually caught it in that spot. Remember, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle says that you cannot know the position to 100% accuracy with no uncertainty. The fact that you caught the electron, it's no longer quantum. You caught it. You know the location. And so in this example, if I caught this molecule right in physical state 2, represented by Xi2, none of these other wave functions, these eigenfunctions 1, 3, and 4, they no longer exist for this purpose. And so what happens is the wave function collapses down to a single value. Okay? If you're talking about the position of an electron, it collapses right down to that position in space where you caught it. If you're talking about its velocity or whatever, you collapse it right down to that value. So the wave function collapses to a single value when you measure it. And just to go back to the original example of Schrodinger's paradox, he doesn't know, if he's got a cat inside the box, he doesn't know if it's alive or it's dead. He doesn't know. But when he opens the box, it is what it is. That opening of the box is the act of measurement. And so it's no longer a probabilistic state between one and two physical states. When he opens it up, it is what it is. He measured it. And so that wave function collapses to a single value, either 1 or 2, alive, dead, whatever you want to say. Okay? So if I were to freeze this molecule, if I could do that, again, stretching a little bit, but if I could freeze that molecule, then these states, 1, 3, and 4, would no longer exist. The wave function would collapse to a single state or a single value. Okay? This is something very important to remember, because when we're talking about things that we're not really measuring, we're seeing their behavior and knowing how they exist, it's only probability. We can say this electron has a probability of being in this range, this area, and maybe it differs, the probability differs depending if you're talking about the middle or the exterior, whatever. But you cannot say that the electron exists here. It's a probabilistic nature of being in multiple spots. So to recap, if you're just thinking about the possible behavior of an electron, where it could be in space, its position, remember, in all reality, assuming you're not measuring it, it could exist in a range of values of position. It can exist in a lot of places, some with higher probability, some with lower probability, but you don't know where it is. There's uncertainty in its position, right? But if you measure it, you actually know where it is now. You've basically frozen that electron because you know exactly where it is. You just caught it in one place, and so you no longer have quantum behavior. You collapse all of that wave function down, collapse of the wave function down to a single value or a single state. In that case, it's the position of the electron. And so measurement destroys the quantum behavior, basically. Okay, so make sure to keep that in mind, because whenever we're looking at these models that we're going to see in future videos, we're not actually measuring it, we're actually calculating probability. We're looking at a function of where something might be, or how fast it might be going within a certain range of values. Okay, so hopefully this cleared a little bit up about the act of measurement, Schrodinger's paradox, etc. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for future videos and notifications. Thank you.